trunk, and Latifah squeezed herself into the spare tire compartment. When they got to the border patrol officers opened the trunk, looked around, didn't see anything, and waved them through. They managed to drive to the sea, where they met another accomplice named Christian Alombo. Christian was Tina's former capoeira instructor. He agreed to help when Tina asked him, and even lent his car so the women could drive to the Oman coast. On a little boat, Christian took the women all the way out to the yacht where Javert was waiting. The women were knocked into the water by the waves, there was a storm brewing, and Christian was even warned to turn back by other fishermen. But once the women finally got onto the boat, Christian said, "See you next time," and he headed back. But when Christian got back to his car, he could see it was surrounded by police officers. He would be taken and held in an Omani jail for 2 months. On the yacht, the women didn't know yet that Christian had been detained. Latifah posted on Instagram saying, "I have escaped UAE after being trapped for 18 years," and they set sail. But soon the women started to realize that their captain, Javert, was cutting corners. There was hardly any food, the boat was filthy and covered in cockroaches. Latifah would later say that he was only ever focused on money and profit. Regardless, Javert continued sailing toward India, where the women hoped to fly to the US with a fake Irish passport that Latifah had obtained. But as they got closer to India, Javert started to share that the yacht was low on fuel. And they also found out that Christian had been captured. Javert suggested to Latifah that she reach out to a human rights organization called Detained in Dubai, dedicated to providing legal assistance to immigrants detained in the UAE. Latifah called the organization and begged for help in publicizing her case. Even though the trip was tense, she was seasick, and all of her belongings were soaked from the stormy sea, Latifah still found moments to lie on the deck of the boat and marvel at the stars. Quote, "I have never known true freedom," she wrote. "For me, it's something worth dying for," close quote. She asked Tina to sleep on the deck of the boat with her so that they could look at the open sky all night, even though Latifah didn't quite understand the point and preferred to sleep below deck out of the wind. But for Latifah, it was the first and only time in her life that she looked upon the sky as a completely free person. About 1 week into the trip, and 30 miles off the coast of India, Javert noticed a boat trailing them and a plane circling overhead. They followed them all night, then another day. Latifah grew very quiet. The second night, Tina and Latifah went below deck to brush their teeth and get ready for bed around 10 p.m. Suddenly, there were loud blasts and the sounds of boots landing on the deck above. Latifah said to Tina, "They found me." The women locked themselves in the bathroom and started sending out SOS texts to friends, family, and the Detained in Dubai organization. Then smoke started pouring in through the cracks in the door, through the vents and the windows. The women started coughing and fell to the ground. Latifah told Tina that she was sorry, and she hugged her, and then she opened the door and stumbled out. With assault rifles and lasers pointed at the women, groups of masked men grabbed them and forced them up onto the deck. They saw that the captain and crew had been beaten and bound, causing puddles of blood on the wood. The guards tied Latifah's hands behind her back and pushed her down, but she refused to go down without a fight, kicking at them and grabbing onto anything she could hold. She screamed at them, "Shoot me here! Don't take me back!" Then she disappeared overboard. The soldiers who carried Latifah away were members of the Indian military. They had been sent by the Prime Minister of India, who had struck a deal with Latifah's father. Tina and Javert were taken to the UAE, where they were held in detention and interrogated. Back in England, the Detained in Dubai organization started contacting authorities and news. A few days went by with no news about the terrified princess, who had contacted them and sent panicked texts as she was being kidnapped. Then, they got an email from a lawyer in Florida with a video attached. Latifah had created a kill switch.
My name is Latifah Maktoum, and I'm making this video because it could be the last video I make.
She recorded a 40-minute video detailing all of her mistreatment and all of her father's crimes. She had recorded it in Tina's apartment and sent it to lawyers with instructions to release it in the event of her capture or murder.
This video can help me because all my father cares about is his reputation. He will kill people to protect his own reputation. He only cares about himself and his ego.
She started the video by saying, quote, "If you are watching this video, it's not such a good thing. Either I'm dead or I'm in a very, very, very bad situation. What do I talk about? Do I talk about all the murders? Do I talk about all the abuse I've seen?" Close quote. She said that her father was a major criminal. She said he tortured and imprisoned women who disobeyed him. Much of what was shared in this article and so in this YouTube video too was from Latifah's video. She spoke of her sister's sedation. She accused her father of killing Bushra, her aunt. She said that she wanted to run away because she finally wanted a life where she wouldn't be silenced. She imagined living in a world where she could wake up in the morning and think, quote, "I can do whatever I want today. I can go wherever I want. I have all the choices in the world," close quote. The Detained in Dubai organization sent the video to all major news outlets and posted it on YouTube, and word started to spread of the kidnapped princess. When the video was released, the UAE also released Javert and Tina from detention. Together with Detained in Dubai, they started a media campaign called Free Latifah. They contacted the BBC. They created and released a documentary. The royal family in the UAE finally released a statement saying that Latifah had been kidnapped, but it was by Javert, but saying that she was now safe with her family in Dubai. In reality, according to Latifah, she was taken to a desert prison named Al Awir with blacked out windows. At first, she was mistreated by the guards, but when the video was released, they started bringing her food on gilded plates, begging her to recant her statement. The now very active Free Latifah movement started experiencing some inner tension when Javert and his wife listed the jewels that Latifah had given them on Craigslist. He claims that he never meant to sell them, he was just gauging the price. About a year went by, Tina returned to her parents' house, the flower farm, and then one night, Tina got a text. It was from a woman who worked for Latifah, and it said, quote, "Hi, Miss Tina, I hope you respond. I'm scared to help Miss Latifah, but she's very kind to me," close quote. Soon, with the help of this anonymous accomplice and Tina, Latifah had her own smuggled phone, and she was in an active group chat with Tina and a select few other defenders. From behind the scenes, Latifah started organizing the movement for her own release. She created logos, she reviewed files to send to the UN, and she instructed people to not trust the photos of her that the royal family was sharing. Escaped Princess number 4. Princess Haya. Around this time, Princess Haya, the Sheikh's youngest wife, who usually accompanied him to political events, was allegedly caught having an affair with her bodyguard. Haya managed to escape and become a fugitive in London with her 2 children. Then she started a legal battle, asking the English court for protection for herself and her children from the Sheikh. According to her, the Sheikh was threatening her life, threatening to take her children away. He attempted to take her to the same desert prison where Latifa was tortured. As evidence of her husband's cruelty, Haya cited his mistreatment of his daughters, Shamsa and Latifa. So as part of Haya's court proceedings, British officials asked to speak with the sisters. One day, the Sheikh asked to see Latifa. He told her that Shamsa is free now, and he said they could talk. He stepped out of the room so that Latifa and Shamsa could have their private rendezvous. It was the first time they were seeing each other and speaking in years. But Shamsa was unrecognizable. She was happy, energetic, and a little frantic. She praised Allah, she praised their father. She told Latifa that their father gave her a phone. He even told her that she was free to travel, but now she didn't even want to. All she wanted to do was stay home all day and worship. Latifa started to open up to Shamsa, telling her the story of her capture on the yacht, and as she did so, she started to cry. But Shamsa whispered to her, just be careful, be respectful. Latifa would posit later that Shamsa may have been worried that the room was bugged, but in that moment, Latifa snapped, screaming at her sister, quote, you have 10 seconds, tell me what you want, because I went to prison so many times for you, I almost died for you, close quote. Shamsa was shocked by this response, and just said, I'm so confused. She said that sometimes she feels like she wants to escape, then other times she feels like she wants to stay. Their father came back in, and the women were both taken away separately. 3 days later, they were again summoned to see their father. He explained the situation with Princess Haya and the lawsuit, and told them that they would have to say that they did not want to testify. But Latifa refused, saying that as long as she was held captive, she would not testify on her father's behalf. But during this meeting, Shamsa was more emotional than the last meeting. She cried hysterically, saying, whatever happens to me, I don't care, but I will not hurt my sister, so whatever my sister wants, I will do. After 4 hours of trying to convince the women to no avail, they were separated again, and Latifa would later learn that Shamsa's phone had been taken away. Their father was forced to make a statement on his own, claiming that neither Latifa nor Shamsa wanted to talk to the lawyers. After Latifa's video and after Princess Haya's public case, the pressure was renewed to put out a good image. Guards courted Latifa with offers to take her out to bookstores, to go shopping. Latifa texted from her secret phone that it was excruciating to say no, since she craved fresh air and sunlight, but she knew that if she was photographed outside, then it would hurt Princess Haya's case. Dubai started doing some image control, hosting the Global Women's Forum Dubai in February 2020. Heidi Blake writes, quote, 3,000 participants from more than 80 countries assembled to hear speakers including Ivanka Trump, who praised Sheikh Mohammed's steadfast commitment to women's advancement, and Britain's former Prime Minister Theresa May, who accepted a fee of £115,000 to speak about gender equality, close quote. But then the British High Court released their ruling on Haya's case. There was sufficient evidence that Latifa had been abducted, even without her testifying. They saw her video, and they also spoke with Tina. They ruled that Sheikh Mohammed had used his very substantial power to his advantage. Latifa's supporters texted her to celebrate the good news. The courts had confirmed that she was illegally kidnapped, but Latifa was wary. Sounds good enough, but would it give her her freedom? Latifa's resolve started to show cracks. She said she felt like she was living in a perpetual nightmare. She wasn't even allowed to crack a window, and she felt like she was being suffocated toward a very slow death. Her father also started to realize that you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. He started sending Latifa gifts and telling her that he would always love her. Latifa started worrying that she had caused her father distress. She started feeling sorry for him now that he was getting older. She was panicked about losing her phone or losing contact with the outside world and subsequently losing her mind in captivity. Then one day, the texts from Latifa stopped without a goodbye. In May 2020, the High Court in England published a report that found that Sheikh Mohammed had used Pegasus, an Israeli hacking tool, to hack Latifa's phone and track her messages. They also ordered Sheikh Mohammed to pay Princess Haya £550 million, which is $720 million, the largest divorce settlement in the history of England, and they banned him from seeing their children, saying that they had discovered in private proceedings that Princess Haya had been subject to an exorbitant degree of abuse. The Queen cancelled her invitation to Sheikh Mohammed to appear with her in the royal box at Ascot. But then, a random British teacher in Dubai started posting pictures on Instagram of herself traveling with Latifa. In these pictures, Latifa's expressions were indiscernible. Latifa's advocates, including Tina, started getting statements from lawyers, supposedly issued on behalf of Latifa, telling her that Latifa was happy and free now, and she didn't want them to share her videos or story anymore. Her friends asked to speak to her personally, but the lawyers refused. A cousin of Latifa's, who had been advocating for her from London, went to visit her and came back to report that she was happy and she wanted everyone to move on. Tina was enraged by this, saying, quote, so she can just live her quiet life and this never happened? Excuse me, this did happen. And I was kidnapped as well. I love that part. Tina's like, what about free Tina? What about justice for Tina? But soon after, advocates announced that the Free Latifa campaign was over. They reasoned that it almost looked ridiculous that they were advocating for the freedom of someone who was appearing in Instagram photos traveling the world. They figured that she had struck a deal with someone, perhaps her freedom in exchange for silence. Shamsa, on the other hand, has never been seen in public or in photos again. The photos seemed to put the whole thing to rest, at least politically and on an international stage. Sheikh Mohammed went on to make multi-billion-dollar arms deals and clean energy agreements with the United States under the Biden administration, and the UAE was the host of the 2023 United Nations Climate Change Conference. In 2022, the UN Human Rights Twitter account posted Latifa with the former president of Chile, who reiterated that Latifa wishes for privacy and said that she is doing well. Before publishing this article, Heidi Blake wrote to Latifa personally asking for information. Latifa didn't respond, but an Instagram account appeared with a photo of Latifa in Austria with the caption, quote, I was recently made aware of media inquiries for a piece which casts doubt on my freedom. I can understand it from the outside perspective of seeing someone so outspoken fall off the grid and have others speak on her behalf, especially after everything that has happened, which appears to make me look like I'm being controlled. I am totally free and living an independent life, close quote. But the people who were closest with Latifa still struggle with the situation. For example, Tina wondered if Latifah was free, why she hadn't sent her so much as a single text. When she spoke to Heidi Blake, Tina told her that she had recently bought a one-way ticket to Thailand, where she planned to be off the grid for a while. Heidi Blake also spoke to a nurse who worked in Latifah's estate, who informed her that Latifah is, in fact, free. She drives around Dubai. She lives in her own home. In exchange, the nurse said she's keeping the family business private. When Heidi Blake asked about Shamsa, the nurse said that she had no idea what happened to her. But Heidi Blake chose to end the article with a quote from Latifah that she had made earlier, a text that was something she wrote not long after she was captured, saying, quote, "There will never be a conclusion where Latifah is happy with her UAE family. Never. I want to live, exist, and die as a fully emancipated person. My soul will be happy with that. I need that. It's my destiny, and the only conclusion I'll accept." That article was published in The New Yorker in 2023. It went on to win multiple awards and inspire a podcast series and a 60 Minutes episode and more. I loved this article. I thought it was very well written, and I want to mention specific things that I thought made this article so good. One, I really liked the way this piece was structured. It started with the story of Latifah's abduction, and then it went back in time to reveal how they had gotten in that situation. Two, I also liked that Heidi Blake didn't just focus on the princesses and their abductions. She also mentioned sex workers and other women who also suffered at the hands of these men. I was glad that those abuses weren't glossed over simply because those victims aren't princesses. Number three, I loved the quotes that were sprinkled in from Latifah insisting on her freedom and the philosophical importance of freedom as an ideal and as a value, paired with her obsessive and powerful movements to secure her own freedom. That combination of Latifah's motivation and Latifah's actions was done so cleanly that the article produced this reverence and gratitude in me as the reader for my own freedom without me even realizing that throughout the whole article, the journalist was moving me toward that reaction with these perfectly placed treatises on freedom. Latifah's words and writings were integrated in such a way that they never felt overdone or disingenuous. Number four, the characters. The character descriptions in this piece were so well done. Here are some adjectives that Heidi Blake used to describe the people who she met in this piece. She called one chauffeur owlish in his knit sweater. She called Tina, quote, "a sturdy, forthright woman with high cheekbones and ice blue eyes." And I saw Tina and I was like, yeah, that's a sturdy, forthright woman with high cheekbones and nice blue eyes. Heidi Blake has essentially made her career as a journalist writing about corrupt, powerful leaders, and she was likely putting her life at risk in publishing this article, so I have to give her credit for publishing it regardless. I think that she's a very, very brave person, and I think that she is a stellar writer. A little while back, I was listening to the Bit Fruity podcast where Matt Bernstein was interviewing the wonderfully talented writer Kat Tenbarge about hate campaigns against famous women on the internet. They went through the Amber Heard case, referencing the podcast Who Trolled Amber, and they also went in depth about a recent Chapel Roan scandal. In both of these cases, and in a few others, they found that much of the hate directed at these female celebrities, and even just a lot of misogynistic hate on the internet in general, came not from people, but from bots. For example, in one online hate campaign directed toward the musician Chapel Roan, BuzzFeed published a report that found that bots made up over 23% of the negative posts about Chapel. This is not to say that organic, homegrown misogyny doesn't exist on the internet. Humans are also subject to confirmation bias and representativeness heuristic, so we are more likely to believe a lie if it confirms a bias or stereotype that we already have. Like if I already believe that feminists hate children, when I hear that Chapel Roan, I don't know, drop kicked a toddler, then I'm more likely to believe it. But that conversation did have me wondering who is paying for these major hate campaigns against women, especially public victims and feminists, and why? What do they have to gain from it? At risk of sounding conspiratorial, the more that I thought about it, the more I came to a similar conclusion that they came to on the Bit Fruity podcast, which is that there are very, very powerful men, politicians, billionaires, oligarchs who use, abuse, and victimize the women in their lives, and their social power is undermined by movements like the feminist movement, which encourages victims to speak up and leave their abusers, and which gives them a public platform to shame the people who hurt them. I believe that many of these people with billions of dollars realize that with a snap of their fingers and with 0.001% of their budget, they can turn the tide of public opinion and make us peasant laborers less likely to believe their and their friends' victims when they come forward. I mean, there's your mode of opportunity and means. Maybe these people use public opinion and our online town squares as just another arm of their abuse campaigns. And soon we have normal everyday people walking around spouting the nonsensical rhetoric of a deeply twisted, woman-hating oil billionaire. The Who Trolled Amber podcast alleged that much of the anger toward Amber Heard online around 2022 was manufactured and spread by bot campaigns based in Saudi Arabia, where Johnny Depp has close ties with the royal family. Saudi Arabia currently has this young, handsome crown prince / current prime minister named Mohammed bin Salman, often called MBS for short, and it seems like MBS understands the same things that Sheikh Mohammed understands and understood. It doesn't matter how much money they have to gain full respect and allyship with the West, they also need this cultural influence, and so long as women are an oppressed class, many Westerners may perceive them as scarily regressive, despite their enormous wealth and progress. MBS has made similar major law changes, like Sheikh Mohammed, such as lifting the ban on driving for women, but he does still lead an authoritarian government, according to Wikipedia. He kills, imprisons, and tortures men and women who disagree with him. But I would argue that MBS is taking a more modern approach, almost like he is taking Sheikh Mohammed's ideas a step further and trying to turn Saudi Arabia into a cultural hub. He has introduced things like film festivals and comedy shows, and he has become close with major Hollywood celebrities as part of his Vision 2030 plan that seeks to boost the nation's entertainment and sports sectors. I've heard multiple online leftist and liberal influencers hint at or outright say that much of the modern online conservative right is backed by big money.
A lot of online right commentators are frankly backed by money.
Yep.
Like not like crowdfunding money,
Yep.
like institutional money.
Yeah. Big money, deep pockets.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not insinuating anything because I truly do not know, but I can't help but notice how much manosphere influencers love Dubai. For example, due to the ongoing investigation into rape and human trafficking accusations in Romania, Andrew Tate has been allowed to relocate to his mansion in Dubai. I also can't help but notice how much of manosphere rhetoric seems to align with the interests of, I don't know, hypothetically, hyper-wealthy abusive leaders who understand the importance of winning the online culture war.
Women are stupid, let's be honest about this. And the reason why, right, it's not just, and she said it herself, misogyny isn't something new, she's right. in ancient China, to the Middle East, to Eastern Europe, everybody knew that women are. So we need to make them second-class citizens. It's interesting to me how she said, "Oh yeah, this isn't something new." Yeah, you're right. Everyone from since ancient times knew that women are. We need to make them second-class citizens. Well, here's the craziest part: they lived in other ends of the world, and they still realized the Asian dudes, bling bing ding, all the way to the fucking Mohammeds in the Middle East, to the Eastern Europeans of Slav. They all knew, damn, women are stupid. We need to go ahead and put them in the kitchen. Now they're out the kitchen. Well, what's going on?
Which civilization of all the ones that you listed do you like the most? Do you like modern America, or do you like Saudi Arabia, or do you like ancient Japan? What do you like the most?
Well, look, I like any society that has women under control, and right now we don't, which is why shit is fucked up.
So why did you move to Saudi Arabia? They don't have the right to vote. They can barely drive.
It's a great place.
Do you want Sharia law? No,
They can drive now. They can drive.
Like,
They can drive, and that's bad.
wait, are you? But be
So
honest.
you think that Saudi Arabia is a better country than America?
When it comes to handling women, yes.
But we were talking about in the future that maybe there's a world where you would have more than one wife. Right?
She understands that.
What do you say about that?
I don't know.
I don't want to tell you what your takeaway should be, but here's one lesson I took from writing the script. As I was reading Latifah's story, I found myself walking through the world with a new gratitude for my freedom, especially as a woman. I would encourage you to experience that same gratitude and to note that our freedom was never given from the beginning of time, but rather something that was earned through the courageous, selfless hard work of people like Latifah. So I don't know, I guess just appreciate it, and don't let anybody convince you that you don't deserve it. That's all. Bleach blonde bomb. A former tennis champion, Vera continues her Her dedication to fitness through Red Bull races, weightlifting, and boot camp classes. In her journalistic career, Vera has interviewed everyone from stars to Roger Federer. She is an open and opinionated feminist. As the wellness editor of Teen Vogue, she ran the magazine's sexual assault awareness campaign. She wrote about sexual harassment at Coachella, and she won many journalistic awards. It is my impression that she holds herself and those around her to a high standard. And if you dare to interview her, she's not shy about correcting you, disagreeing with you, and saying things to other journalists like,
I don't think that's the right question.
But during the 2024 presidential election, as a journalist, Vera was running into a problem. She had been raised as a leftist, but now called Democrats, and I quote, fucking losers. She had become Republican curious and tried to interview Trump supporters, but she found that in New York, and especially if she made herself known as a journalist for a mainstream media magazine, then many Republicans directly would not speak to her. At this time, Vera was single, and she decided to make a profile on a conservative dating app as her alter ego, Veronica, to seek out the extreme right ends of the political spectrum and let them take her out on dates so that she could ask them about their dating preferences, what they want out of a relationship, and what they expect from women. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Siobhan Breyer-Aguilar. I'm a writer and editor, so I take famous pieces of media, typically articles or books, I critique them, and then I use them as a vehicle to discuss maybe like some concepts that were mentioned in the article. So in this video, I will summarize and analyze Vera Papasova's experience dating and writing about men in the alt-right. I will critique the article, and I will let that lead us into a video essay-style discussion about whether or not it is a wise idea to date or marry people who disagree with us politically. Sound good? Okay, let's get into it. I'm editing and I had a quick note. The reason I'm not looking at the camera is because I'm reading an article out loud that I published on my website. So if you want to just read the article along with the video, or if you prefer to read instead of watching the video, I have the link in my description to the article itself. Vera's article is called I Spent Nearly a Year on a Conservative Dating App as a Liberal. Here's what I learned. In it, Vera explains how on the conservative dating app as Veronica, she matched with 60 men and ended up going on dates with 14 of them. She prioritized choosing men who were on the extreme right or the alt-right, and she emphasizes in interviews that the men she met on these dates are not a representation of the overall Republican Party or Trump's base as a whole. She intentionally matched with men who had things in their profiles like alt-right conspiracy theorist. On the dates, there was one man whom it seems like Vera genuinely liked. She describes him as her favorite, and she assigns him the pseudonym Jared. Vera followed a strict safety protocol on her dates, and she ran a background check on everyone she planned to meet with. But when she ran a background check on Jared, she found that just a few years prior, he had sent her an email personally promising to, quote, kill her slowly. He had sent this email to her at a time when she was a public champion for feminism, so she didn't know if he would recognize her personally or if he had simply found her email on a 4chan forum. When Vera met up with Jared, she was surprised to discover that he was shy, soft-spoken, and even sweet and self-reflective. He didn't seem to recognize her or remember that he had sent her death threats. He was very tall, a former D1 athlete. He described a hobby of his that started during the pandemic where he went alone to a series of restaurants around New York to try their desserts, and he kept a ranking of his favorite spots. She actually found Jared so interesting that he was one of the few men who she went on multiple dates with. But when Jared started to talk about politics, he grabbed the table and his leg began to shake. He shouted, quote, liberal white women are a plague on our society, close quote. He drank 11 iced coffees over the course of their date. At one point, he told a story about how a group of protesters harassed him for wearing a MAGA hat, and he reenacted the scene by standing up in the restaurant and shouting at Vera the same way that the protesters shouted at him. People in the restaurant got frightened by his shouting and cautiously watched Vera and Jared for the rest of their date. Vera says that when Jared talked about politics, his eyes changed and his behavior became erratic. He said to her, quote, if we lived in a different time, we would be hanging white liberal whores in the town square and dragging them through the street for the lies that they spread, close quote. Vera didn't say this in the article, but in an interview she mentioned that Jared did share that he had many concussions and traumatic brain injury symptoms from his years of playing a contact sport. Vera asked Jared to take a deep breath with her, which he did. He calmed down and again sat at the table, but later in the date, as Vera's hand rested on the table, he grabbed her wrist and his eyes changed again. He said, quote, white liberal women say horrible things about me and make everyone hate me and think I'm a bad person, close quote. Vera says that at this point he was no longer looking at her but rather staring off into the distance as if he were in a trance. Vera asked, what did they say about you? And Jared snapped out of it and said, oh, not me. I meant Donald Trump. Vera says that he repeated this problem over a few dates together as she got to know him. He would speak about Donald Trump in the first person as if he himself were Donald Trump. Vera writes, quote, it became clear to me that he truly loved Trump, not just because he identified with Trump, the politician, but because he identified with Trump, the person, being considered bad by progressive standards, close quote. On their second date, Jared remained calm the whole time. He described his childhood in the Northeast. He came from a nice family. He went to a good school. He was a sports prodigy, but he started drinking and doing drugs when he was a teenager. Then he says, quote, something really bad happened, close quote, so he got sober. Vera calculates that he was still dealing with addiction when he sent her death threats. Jared said, quote, for sports, I created an alter ego that helped me harness the violent and dominant energy that I needed to tap into the stronger part of me. That was how I could do more than I thought was possible. The problem was I couldn't turn it off. As long as I was winning, my coaches didn't care what I did. So I was always in it, always partying, anxious about guys from another school, showing up to a party to beat the shit out of my teammates and me. I would drink and do drugs to calm myself down, and then we would go beat up the other guys, close quote. This quote, while troubling, was one of my favorite parts of the article because it gives us some insight into how an otherwise normal and even talented person can become radicalized, and it speaks to a greater societal trend of how institutions and role models can encourage young men to foster violent or aggressive tendencies so long as it benefits the institution, like a nation's military or a college football team, even if that comes at great personal cost to the young man in the form of traumatic brain injury or mental health problems, or in the case of Jared, loneliness. because it will be very difficult for him to find a life partner if he can't control his violent outbursts, even on a first date. Jared also shares that he spends weekends helping young men with mental health problems. On their last date, Vera and Jared were walking through a park when Vera told him that they couldn't keep seeing each other because she disagreed with many of his beliefs. Jared was confused, and he told Vera that he thought they had agreed on most things. She said they did not agree on those things, and he would have recognized that if he asked her any questions about herself. He attempted to kiss her, but she avoided it, and they never saw each other again.
The other thing is that I have a Patreon that I'm like pretty active on, but I would say take advantage of it now. Like, get on there. We're meeting a lot of really cool people, a lot of really, really bright people. On the first level, you get access to a bunch of articles without paywalls that we discuss in the comments. At the second level, you can join our book club. We have a book club that we meet up with every month. We vote on the book, and we've been having some really cool discussions. Soon we'll be meeting up to discuss East of Eden by John Steinbeck. And at the top level, you can join the writers club, and you can send me about 1,000 words of writing that you put together yourself, and I will give you a personalized edit. Obviously, that last level is what takes me the most time, so I might not be able to do it so frequently in the future. So as I said, take advantage of it while you can. I think that it's a pretty cool perk. My Patreon plans are very affordable. I wanted them to be. And if you want to follow along for free, I also have a newsletter that you can sign up for on my website, Siobhan Breyer, that's SIOBHANBRIER.com. And let's get back into the video.
While Vera was on the app, she made a note of a few patterns in what conservative men on this application were searching for in their dating life. Here are some of those patterns. Men who called themselves MAGA bros, men who described themselves as European, looking for their submissive European dream girls. Vera had European in quotes, so I presume they were not actually from Europe, but were rather white Americans looking for submissive white wives. Multiple people labeled themselves on their profiles as white supremacists. Vera met multiple men who believed that women should not have the right to vote. On a few profiles, she saw men who compared the violence on January 6th with how violent they are in bed. Many considered themselves conspiracy theorists. Various men clarified on their profiles that they believe in two genders only. Many profiles used the word pureblood, meaning that they are not vaccinated against COVID-19. Multiple profiles mentioned a hatred of women with pink hair. Many profiles designated themselves as anti-feminists. Vera says that she asked her matches about their relationship expectations and family values, and she writes, quote, "Each man seemed to know exactly what he was looking for in a wife and articulated it before we even met. She was typically an unvaccinated Christian white woman willing to quit her job and commit to homeschooling children. Her hobbies might include tending to a garden and feeding the animals." She says that in her full year of dating conservative men, she never paid for a date, so she gives them credit for that. She wore things like floral dresses and cardigans on dates so as not to blow her cover. She says that a lot of the men she dated worked in finance and actually made a good living. Many of them came from educated backgrounds and even maintain a public image with their friends and coworkers in New York as generally liberal people. Then they go home and get on the internet and have neo-Nazi beliefs, but they learn how to hide that so that they aren't rightfully ostracized. Another date that Vera had was with a man whom she called Tom. They met up outside of St. Patrick's Cathedral, and she found him sitting on the steps wearing a tweed suit and reading a paperback book. Vera describes the scene. Quote, "Veronica," Tom said, standing up and slipping his book into his jacket pocket. "He offered me his hand to go up the stairs like a prince ready to catch me if I lost my balance. Although I walk up 5 flights to my apartment every day, sometimes while carrying heavy things, I placed my palm in his. It's so refreshing to meet someone open to doing this instead of drinking at a bar," he said. "That part felt nice for me too." Close quote. Tom informed Vera that he's not religious, but he would like his kids to have biblical values. Some of his more conservative beliefs may have come from the fact that when his mother died from cancer in high school, the women in his church cooked food for him and his father and took care of him in that way. Vera asked Tom about a term that she had seen online among women who called themselves anti-feminist. The term was biblical patriarchy. Tom responded by reciting from memory the verse in the Bible that calls on women to submit to their husbands. Quote, "Wives, submit yourselves to your own husbands as you do to the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church." Close quote. Tom continued, quote, "Women should be submissive to their husbands, and some people believe they should be trained." Close quote. This is again on date 1. Vera remembered that she had seen on Tom's profile that he was anti-white genocide, so she asked him if his future wife had to be white. He replied, quote, "I believe on principle that white people have a right to maintain a positive identity, and our collective well-being must be maintained with healthy families. White guilt is poisoning kids." Close quote. So, not what she asked, but I think we can take that as a yes. On another date, Vera describes meeting a man whom she calls Brian. She says she wore a long black ribbed dress and met him at a wine bar. When she met him, he put his hand on her lower back and said, "I love that you dressed up for me." She asked him what he looked for in a relationship. He replied, emphasizing that he's looking for a woman willing to fulfill her natural feminine roles. Vera asked what he thinks is the natural masculine role, and Brian replied by saying, quote, "A real man provides discipline, and any talking back or acting out is asking for punishment." Close quote. Vera asked, "Besides obedience, what does a real man need to feel love?" And he said, quote, "The feminists convinced women to be dominant. Where's the love in taking away a man's masculinity? Love isn't always in the cards when people don't know their roles. I'm trying to make enough money to support a family, which means I need someone who can be home and take care of everything there." Close quote. So his position is that he is not yet making enough money to support a family, but he's trying to, and for that reason he deserves to be with a woman who doesn't have a job and takes care of his home. I wonder if he would accept in her place a woman who stays home and tries to cook and clean, but falls short. It's almost like he's holding her to a standard of dichotomous gender roles that even he himself is incapable of meeting. On another date, Vera describes meeting a man who it sounds like was drinking a lot. When she asked him why his last relationship came to an end, he said, quote, "My previous girlfriend killed our child." Close quote. Vera said, "Like she's in jail for murder?" Her date replied, "No, but she should be. She got an abortion and killed our child without asking me." Vera went on a date with a man in his 40s whom she called Ron. He told her that he's passionate about funding women's health clinics. Vera said, like Planned Parenthood? He replied, that's funny, and explained that he was talking about crisis pregnancy centers, which are centers that typically have religious affiliations that target pregnant women to encourage them to not have abortions, sometimes through sharing medically incorrect information designed to frighten the women. Vera continues, quote, when I asked Ron how many abortions he'd prevented with his donations, he said, over 1,000. When I asked how many of those women died as a result of their pregnancy, he said, if they picked up a Bible, God would show mercy. Vera describes another date by writing, quote, at a chic omakase place, Matthew, with an asterisk to show that his name has been changed, 25, from New Jersey, was going off about how we should have never let a woman be head of the Secret Service. With each course, I fired off questions about his upbringing. He mentioned online groups where there were others like him, the kind where people whose radical to me beliefs find validation, and even more than validation, identity itself. Matthew later revealed that he has a swastika tattoo.
And I was like, what is it? And he was like, well, what do you think it is? And I was like, it looks like a swastika. He was like, yeah.
This wasn't in the article, but in interviews, Vera explains that Matthew brought her to a political meeting. She says that as a journalist, she can't call this meeting a neo-Nazi meeting because they didn't call it that in her presence. Matthew instead presented...
I got the swastika tattoo, Zolfanos creator, or Nazi call it. I'm saying Zolfanos creator. BR1 installed, Zolfanos creator. I was just a big fan of Zolfanos. I'm much more partial to Strat Tester version 3.2. Fuck versions. Yeah, no idea. Fuck knows. Give me. Fuck yeah.
This group to her as a meeting of free thinkers. But when she got to the meeting, the people there didn't discuss politics at all, and instead complained about their girlfriends and wives, and offered each other tips as to how to train their partners to be more submissive. The following few sentences are describing some triggering stuff for domestic violence if you want to skip ahead. One man complained that his girlfriend kept breaking his rules by going out in co-ed groups, even though he had prohibited that behavior from her. So the other men in the group gave him tips to make her obey him. These tips included things like withholding money from her, not acknowledging her existence for 48 hours, and implementing a punishment and reward system. They described how he could force her to have sex with him if she refused. Vera offers her own interpretation for what may have led these men to fringe political ideologies. She writes, quote, a lot of my dates seemed to express that they felt lost without a solid definition of what a man is, and even if they did feel like they checked all the boxes for some specified male roles, they still felt like they were getting left behind. Many of their ideologies seemed to be built on this perceived rejection and desire to revert back to how things used to be. A conclusion I came to is that these men feel like most people, including the mass media, don't take the time or have the interest in the time to understand them and where they come from. Valid or not, this seems to compound their feelings of isolation, which in turn bred a lack of curiosity on their part, furthering their own intolerances. Close quote. In the article, Vera ultimately comes to the conclusion that she would not be able to date anyone with alt-right political beliefs, and she admits that she struggled to even feel sexual attraction to them. Quote, I didn't feel that any of the men I dated were that interested in me as a person or where I came from either. I rarely got questions like, why are you Republican curious? What drew you to our dating app? What are your family values? I wondered for a while if this was supposed to be my role. Should I have helped them create a framework for approaching relationships with more curiosity, one that might ultimately lead them toward a more inclusive kind of mindset? Maybe, but it was never my intention to save these men from their hatred. Plus, after all these dates, I started to answer my own questions. I was too different from them, even if that was due to circumstance and upbringing, in ways that made romantic or sexual attraction impossible. Despite my willingness to be open to anything, none of my dates progressed beyond talking. Close quote. In interviews, Vera summed up her experience by saying,
they're the most insecure men I've ever sat down with. It was really difficult to have some of these dates because they were so insecure because they don't really know who they are and they don't know how to figure that out.
Before we move on, I must again mention that Vera had a very strict safety protocol when going on these dates. This isn't an experiment that you should try at home as at work. My biggest critique of this article is that I felt like Vera struggled to define the purpose of this study. In the subheading, she poses the question, have extreme political ideologies divided the dating pool? In paragraph 3, she says she went on these dates in an attempt to not just date, but also understand men in the alt-right. In paragraph 4, she says she wants to figure out where they were coming from and to see if they were misunderstood. But then in paragraph 5, she kind of changes her tune slightly, and she writes, quote, as politics in our country grows more divisive, as the internet fuels hardline cultural ideologies and social discord, as like-minded communities double down on rejecting anything different, is it possible for romantic connections between contrasting groups to even exist? Could dating be a way to help forge an understanding of value systems, of experiences that drive beliefs that can start to bridge the dissonance? Or at the very least, could it teach me about my own rules of attraction? Could I ever be physically enticed by or even intimate with someone with very different political views? Close quote. And that is a very different question. You can understand someone's political beliefs, but not necessarily want to date them. She also posed, by my count, 4 different questions in that last paragraph, which muddies our thesis and purpose. Then around the middle of the article, which I think is late in the article to be still clarifying your objective, we get yet another paragraph stating another slightly different why. Vera writes, quote, part of what I was trying to explore and push back against is the idea that a person's identity can be reduced to a one-dimensional entity based solely on who they voted for. Now, more than ever, we think we can tell everything about someone on the other side just because they wear a red hat or a blue I voted t-shirt. The job I'd assigned myself was to dig deeper, to learn more about these men on the other side of me, way on the other side in most cases. And as someone who cares about bringing people together, I wondered whether it was me who had been excluding them, close quote. So now we are not just trying to explore, but also push back against the idea that your political party defines you. I'm sure you're beginning to see how having multiple theses in our article can make it hard for us to be successful as writers. It's almost like setting too many goals for yourself, so you spread your writing thin, and instead of meeting one goal well, we struggle to meet 3 goals at all. If we distill the somewhat unclear writing, this article told me that its goals were 1, to see if we can understand people in the alt-right, 2, to see if we can fall in love with people who disagree with us politically, and 3, to push back against the idea that we can define people based on who they voted for. So to decide if this article was successful, let's look at it according to its stated goals. 1, did this article help you understand people in the alt-right better? For me personally, I would say that in some cases, yes, it could have helped, but in general, not really. I was hoping that because Vera was getting to know these people in an intimate context, she would be able to learn things about them that we couldn't learn from just interacting with them online when they might be trying to be provocative. In interviews, Vera called these people, quote, the most insecure men she had ever met, close quote. And while I think that's interesting, I also know a lot of people who are insecure who don't become Nazis. I wanted to know a little bit more about their stories. My favorite parts of the article were about Jared, because he described, in his own words, how he had become radicalized, and he also appeared in this article as a somewhat complex character. On one hand, he says these horrible, violent things, but on the other hand, he volunteers with mental health organizations. I would have liked to hear some of the background of the other men as well. Do they have families? Do their families agree with them? Have they been ostracized because of their radical beliefs? Was there a traumatic event that could have led them to isolate themselves? Many of them came across as almost cartoonishly evil, and I think that it's fine to portray them that way if that was our writer's experience, but then I wouldn't state the purpose of the article to understand the other side better, only to write about them in such a one-dimensional way. 2, did this article help you understand if you can fall in love with someone who disagrees with you politically? I think that of the 3 questions, this was the one that the writer was probably the most successful in answering, because she ended the article by essentially saying, I now understand these people better, but I would struggle to date or feel attraction to them. She did talk about herself quite a bit in this article and her personal compatibility with these men, rather than discussing in general terms, can we fall in love across party lines, can love be a way to bridge the gap, these questions she posed. So I do think that perhaps she should have revised her thesis slightly to say, I want to see if I personally can be attracted to members of the alt-right party. And I say that for 2 reasons. One, because whether or not Vera Papasova, as this super disciplined, career-driven New York City single woman in her 30s, can fall for someone who wants her to be a trad wife isn't really relevant to whether or not anyone who disagrees politically can fall in love with each other. I don't think any of these men were going to lasso and domesticate this like buff dime who was literally close personal friends with the president of Planned Parenthood. The second reason I would have revised her thesis is because this wasn't really an article about whether or not a Democrat could date a Republican. This was an article about dating members of the alt-right, some of whom are actually further right on the political spectrum than Donald Trump. They are in a category of their own, a category where extremely misogynistic views are the norm, and where their politics likely infect nearly every aspect of their lives. 3, did this article push back against the idea that we can define people based solely on whom they voted for? I think this was the aspect of the article that I most took issue with. The writer seemed to want to argue at first that we can't define people based on whom they voted for, but concluded at the end of her study that we can. She did, of course, come to this conclusion after intentionally choosing to date people who define themselves by their politics. If I were her editor, I would have removed the parts of the article where our writer sort of waxes poetic about not defining people based on their politics. Not because I disagree with her points, but because I feel that an article about not defining people by their politics would be a different article entirely. Instead, this article almost read as why you can and should define people by their politics while dating, because conservative men are crazy and insecure. If she wanted to make the point that you cannot date people by their politics, then I think that she, 1, chose the wrong men. Like I said, these are more cult members than just like men generally on the right, and 2, she should have written more about their lives beyond their politics. And to conclude my critique, if the point of the article was to get some interesting gossip about how men in the alt-right date, then the article was successful. It was fascinating to learn about these strange characters, but as writers, we must be honest and succinct about our goals. And given how extensive and dangerous the research process was for this article, I would have liked if she went a little deeper than just, they're crazy and wrong and I'm not attracted to them. One comment on this article on Reddit said, quote, it's an interesting read and the author has some keen perspective. Ultimately though, I don't like these articles. It feels like it adds to the mystique of the millennial male conservative without any substantive conclusions. It intentionally glamorizes the subculture and only feeds fuel to the fire of lying white liberal women. Further, she spends more time writing about her perspective on them rather than their perspective on the world. I don't need undercover columnists telling me how angry and misguided they are. I know that they're angry and misguided. It's not a useless piece, but it's the journalistic equivalent of a cult documentary, entertaining in a look how fucked up they are kind of way, but it doesn't really move the conversation forward. Another comment said, I don't know if I'm online too much, but this article doesn't say anything new, does it? The guys she went on dates with were mostly radicalized whack jobs who weren't interested in her apart from her ability to birth children and be a mythical homemaker. Big surprise. Close quote. Now, I wanted to say one thing that I really liked about this article, and I think that Vera has done well for a lot of her journalistic career. Growing up, me personally, personally, Catholic school, Catholic household, I learned that the ultimate moral standard was the golden rule. You know, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I learned that empathy was a celebrated and encouraged trait, and that we should have empathy even for those who do us harm, turn the other cheek. And while I think that empathy can be very useful in coming to understand, explain, and even predict the actions of others, sometimes in relationships, excess empathy for people who hurt you can make you remarkably vulnerable. When I was researching a YouTube video that I made about the author Cormac McCarthy and how he groomed a teenager, I read a study about the main reasons that people go back to abusive partners or spouses after getting hurt by them. Aside from more predictable reasons like financial dependence or social pressure, one of the biggest predictors was how much the victim empathized with or identified with their abusive spouse. Abusive partners can recognize your empathy and use it to manipulate you. In a circumstance like that, it can actually be a very necessary survival skill to learn how to turn off your empathy. Too much empathy can also sometimes cause us to over-intellectualize cruel or unjust actions from others when their motivation could have actually been very simple. Another article that I read when I was researching the Cormac McCarthy video talked about a study where they asked men who had been convicted of domestic violence why they had hurt their wives. They asked them, what are the benefits of being abusive? A person who is in a relationship with one of these abusive men might twist themselves into pretzels to try to justify their behavior, saying things like, well, he had a tough home life and it was all he knew, or he doesn't want to do it but I made him because I upset him, or deep down he really loves me and he wants what's best for me. But when they asked this group of abusers what the benefits were of attacking their wives, the reasons were actually quite straightforward. They said things like, and this is kind of bleak, like, there's a trigger warning on this. If I hit her, then I can feel superior. It keeps the relationship going because she's too scared to leave. I can get money, I can get sex, I get total control of decision making, I can use her money for drugs, I get power, she's an object. I get a robot babysitter, maid, sex, food, ego booster, get her money again, get her to quit her job so she can take care of the house. I can decide how the money is spent again. I can buy the toys I want. She works for me. I don't have to help out. Don't have to get up, get hard, watch kids, do dishes, get up at night with kids, do laundry, change diapers, clean house, bring kids to appointments, activities, mop floors, clean refrigerator. I get to make the rules and break them when I want. I can convince her she's nuts, convince her she's unattractive, convince her she's to blame, convince her she's the problem. I'm the king of the castle. Have someone to unload on, have someone to bitch at, get her to drop charges, get her to support me, to her family, my family, cops, judge, prosecutors, etc. So as you can see, sometimes I think that we afford mean, abusive people more psychoanalysis than they perhaps deserve. And I think I have to mention that if you didn't already notice, how similar some of the language that these abusive men use is to the alt-right men that Vera spoke to in this article. If somebody is talking about you the way that the men talk in that study and the way that many of the men spoke about women in Vera's article, I believe that the best thing that you can do for yourself, your family, and your well-being, some would argue the most morally good thing to do, is to turn your empathy off, forget your golden rule training, and get out. I still don't like it when people go to the opposite extreme of empathy and say, I don't owe anybody anything, because I don't think that's true. I do still think that you owe everyone a basic level of decency and respect, but you do not owe anyone your sexual attraction. You don't owe anyone a romantic relationship, especially if they don't even respect you enough to believe that you deserve autonomy over your own life.
One more thing, when they call you a bitch, say thank you. Thank you very much.
I think that Vera did a great job of showing that. One person who read this article left a comment, quote, I think a lot of the cultural discourse around modern gender war stuff really overcomplicates things and tries to find more sophisticated or sympathetic explanations for why these men think and act the way they do. Intentionally or not, I think this article actually lays it out extremely cleanly. For a long time, women were not afforded respect. Their needs and desires were considered subordinate, if not completely irrelevant. Thanks to the gains of feminism, that is not as true as it once was, and women in many parts of the world have significantly more entitlement to respect and autonomy, and these guys don't like that. It's really that simple. There's no version of the appeal to women to give guys like this a chance, or to not judge them so harshly, or to change their standards, or however else you want to dress it up, that isn't actually just asking women to put up with someone who doesn't respect her as a person for the other benefits of a relationship, question mark, and I'm kind of tired of pretending like there's something else going on, close quote. In this story, Vera was able to portray these men as dangerous without over-intellectualizing their motivations. She also showed how their political values dominated the personal realm and affected what they expect from women. This portrayal from Vera can be beneficial to women who might still be interested in dating men in this alt-right cult, thinking, well, politics isn't everything, or maybe I can save him. So that, to clarify, my critique isn't that Vera didn't have more empathy for these men. My issue is that she painted the purpose of the article as if it were about reaching across the aisle and then didn't really do that. I hope that makes sense. It's a writing critique, not a personal critique. I don't think that in real life, Vera has to have more understanding for these people who never extended her the same courtesy. All of that said, after reading this article, I don't feel hatred towards these men. I'm not enraged by their opinions. I'm choosing to not be upset about it. They are perfect strangers to me, and I believe that the bravado and rage state online can prevent us from seeing these men as what they really are, which is victims of a bigger system. Social media companies in the United States have been allowed by the government to knowingly engineer their products to be addictive, not beneficial and educational to a voting populace, addictive. And rage and anger and fear are what keep our attention glued to these devices. And people like Charlie Kirk and Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes and even Donald Trump recognize that and use it to make themselves more wealthy and powerful, especially in a country like the United States, where car dependency keeps us away from local social circles, where lack of government social support and free healthcare makes us feel like we need to work all the time to make enough money to literally just survive, and where essentially unregulated food and other substances are making us constantly anxious. It is no wonder that people, especially young people, are starved of social connection and authenticity. So we act as if influencers are our social circle, and famous influencers are just the most effective foot soldiers at making you you addicted to social media and putting more money in tech oligarchs' pockets? It doesn't matter if what they say is true. It only matters that it makes you more addicted to your screen. And many of these men and the people they hurt are victims of that. Recently, a young man contacted the influencer Nick Fuentes and said that he is in love with his girlfriend, but he worries about marrying her because she's Dominican and his children wouldn't be white.
What do you want for your life? Do you want Dominican children?
Like, that is some bleak shit. But hey, at least the owners of social media platforms have more money than God. I also want to give Vera major credit for her bravery during the study.
God doesn't
We saw in an
exist.
article that there were
Dipshit.
multiple times that she had to de-escalate dangerous situations, and although she had people helping her with safety during the dating process, I'm sure that there are men she dated
I
who
don't care if it
heard
was
about this article
euphemism.
after it was published and were enraged by it, and I'm sure she knew that would happen, and she went forward with her writing anyway, which is tough as fuck. But I still think that the main question posed in this article is an interesting one. Should you date people who disagree with you politically? In 2025, when politics are so polarized, is it even possible to fall in love with people who vote differently from you? And I'm not talking about people who go to neo-Nazi meetings and who don't think women should have jobs, but let's be honest about the fact that while most Gen Z women who voted for Kamala, most Gen Z men who voted for Trump. And this is happening in a lot of countries. People are having trouble dating because their partners have political opinions that aren't compatible with theirs. I feel this article didn't answer these questions, but let's try to answer them here. In 1948, a short story called The Lottery by an author named Shirley Jackson was published in the New
I
Yorker.
know this.
The story depicts a
I know
small
this
town
story.
of about 300 people as they go through their yearly tradition that they call the lottery. Everyone in town gathers in the town square almost as if for a church
Oh
picnic.
my
They also have
God,
slips
you
of paper from a big black box. Finally, when everyone in the town gets paper slips, everyone's is blank except for one woman, a young mother of 3 named Tessie. Tessie's slip has a black dot on it. So, as is custom, the person who drew the losing slip of paper, in this case Tessie, is promptly stoned to death. So Tessie is murdered by everyone in her village, including her neighbors, friends, husband, and young children. The story seems to serve as a warning that all of us are capable of acts that may seem horrifying out of context, so long as those acts have social support and years of precedent in our social traditions. This warning is as terrifying as it is true. We would all love to read The Lottery and think that we would be the exception. We would go against our families and institutions, and we would prefer to be stoned before we stoned another. But a quick look at history demonstrates that even otherwise kind and morally sound people are capable of hurting and even killing, especially when a greater institution labels their victims as outsiders. Even institutions that were designed to maintain a high moral standard, like churches, have become our social justification, both historically and in the modern world, to hurt or kill our fellow man. But those social institutions that separate all of us humans into neat in-groups and out-groups don't just have to be churches. I've seen people in the same breath criticize the brainwashed nature of churchgoers, then turn around and exhibit the same exclusionary behaviors in the name of politics, gang affiliation, gender, race, even in the name of a sports team or a celebrity fandom. Now that much of our social lives are online, there is no shortage of passionate microgroups that will be happy to give you an excuse to be cool to other people for being different from you. Today, as we talk about in-groups and out-groups, I especially want to discuss political affiliation. I don't think that it's a coincidence that Shirley Jackson wrote The Lottery in 1948, likely in part to the shock of seeing 2 world wars incite and justify large-scale human-on-human interspecies violence. As Yuval Noah Harari pointed out in his book Sapiens, if an alien landed on Earth before the world wars, they would have no clear or visible reason, no natural phenomenon, no fight for resources that would explain why all of these human beings suddenly killed all of these other human beings.
You're a
political
cunt.
affiliation that divides us into in-groups and out-groups can take humans who are otherwise thoughtful and gentle, or at least civil toward their common man, and cause them to commit despicable acts of violence, or at least institutions can harness and justify and organize violent urges that we are all born with on account of us ultimately being animals, not gods. Ages ago, I remember becoming curious about what makes people stereotype other groups, or maybe become racist or sexist, or in any other way organize themselves into in-groups and out-groups. I remember wondering if it was because we were once hunter-gatherers who needed to fight against and exclude any groups of wanderers who weren't of our own tribe, but I looked it up and I learned that that's actually not true. Research has revealed that among early groups of humans, when they encountered other wandering tribes in the wild, they shared intel and resources and gifts, but the same article said that studies have found that when people start to feel stressed or threatened, they become more exclusionary. They start to exhibit more behaviors like racism or sexism or other phobias or stereotypes. For example, if I'm a visibly gender non-conforming person and I develop the belief that all Christian people will hurt, judge, or exclude me based on the way that I look, then am I stereotyping Christian people? Sure, there are probably Christian people who wouldn't be hateful toward me, but I've seen it happen and I feel worried for my safety because of that prior anxiety that I mentioned. Then the logical conclusion will be that it's better for my health and well-being to stay away from that out-group and stick with my in-group.
right now, and I'm
at risk in the world I feel, the more I will stick to my niche in-group.
Boss of Grey Matter.
In-group, out-group
Have a big
model
enough
doesn't
man.
always protect your safety.
You're gonna need a big enough. You're gonna need a big enough than that.
That I can't find now, so I'll draw it. Let's say I have a religious way of thinking. And if you're not looking at your screen, what I have here is sort of a box, and I've portioned off people who are in the same
I can pull some of these drops.
good guys, bad guys way of thinking.
I like
And
crack.
I've also portioned off the people who are
That's
not in
why I
my
like
religion.
as
I
if
might
I was
think
on
that these are the good
crack.
guys, this is where I'm safe, these are the people who are going to heaven, and these are
It's
the
gonna
people
be
who are in
max.
all these other religions in the world that haven't seen the light and that are dangerous. But what this diagram did was it then portioned off part of this box into a different section. They used a different color to represent people who are really dangerous. So maybe we can just say that orange represents people who would hurt you, who would do harm to you. And what this diagram that I saw did was then create a different section, which was over on the side of the box. And because it was on the side, it created an overlap between bad people who are in my in-group. And so for the case of this exercise, we'll say dangerous people who are in my in-group.
and I might trust them because they're in my in-group, and I might think that they're the good guys, and I might distrust a lot of really good people who might be very beneficial to my life because they're not in my religion. Maybe you're not religious and you think, well, this doesn't really apply to me, so I want to take a different model, and I've split this now up into a pretty common way of
I wouldn't trust a Dark Souls 2
among
player.
at least a lot of people who I know, and probably a form of thinking that I've had before too, which is that the good guys are the people who vote like me. In my case, that would be the American left. And the bad guys are the people who don't vote like me. If we again kind of split up the people who are maybe really dangerous, some might say that this could be a more accurate representation of reality.
Many people watching this video might resist this conflation, this idea that some of us treat our political in-group in the same way that a religious zealot might treat other members of their own religion. And in many cases, I think that resistance is fair. Your religious affiliation typically comes from where you were born and who your family is, especially in the case of ethno-religions. If you are born in a Buddhist country, you are much more likely to be Buddhist than if you were born in a Muslim country. This is why it wouldn't be fair or justified for a benevolent God to send you to hell or heaven essentially just because of where you were born. Politics, on the other hand, does involve more of a choice and tends to change more throughout life, with events like marriage, university, and travel having an impact on what political party you affiliate with. But I am still uncomfortable with how quickly we label all people who voted differently from us as evil or foolish. Are there people who voted for Donald Trump because they are hateful and angry? Yeah, I think that's safe to assume. But there are also people who voted for him just because MAGA is their in-group, and maybe they never had the chance to question that belief set. It is, in a way, a relief when someone I like has the same political leanings as me. I did personally choose to marry someone who aligns with me politically, but I've met people on the left, so people in my in-group, who are racist or classist or exclusionary and embody the qualities that they claim to oppose. And I have also met people on the right who were tolerant and welcoming. I recently created a poll on my YouTube channel asking my subscribers if they would date someone who didn't align with them politically, and one comment said, quote, "You'll have to trust me when I say that I'm very socially liberal. It astounds me how fellow liberals can't fathom conservatives. Consider that most modern liberals are exceedingly privileged, more than most conservatives," close quote. I was curious about whether or not that was true, so I looked it up, and typically urban, highly educated, wealthy people in the United States do have left-leaning ideals. According to OpenSecrets.org, high-dollar donors give to both parties, but Democratic candidates often raise more from wealthy urban areas like New York, LA, San Francisco, while smaller donations favor Trump and MAGA Republicans more, which reflects more of a working-class populist base. This chart depicts that blue counties contribute 71% of the money to the United States GDP. Now, whether or not Trump actually shows up for a working-class base is a different conversation, but I know that in my case, my left-leaning beliefs have been influenced by my education, my parents' education, my grandparents' education, and by the fact that I've lived outside of the United States for long tracts of time. And I do think it would be intellectually dishonest of me to then turn around and criticize people for not having the same opinions as me if many of those opinions came from privileges that I've been afforded. And I am uncomfortable with the rhetoric of some people on the left who treat everyone who disagrees with them as villains and brandishes this moral superiority almost as if it were a class indicator. The New York Times, which I love, it's full of stories like this, stories that don't seem to realize how much of their ethics or open-mindedness is really just wealth. Your son doesn't like eggs? We'll have him visit a dozen French chefs, dear. He'll come around. Dear ethicist, my husband's family trust owns and collects income from an ice holding facility, and I feel just horrible about it. And of course, there are absolutely people who are liberals and leftists not because they want to posture about the moral superiority of a wealthy in-group, but because they believe in principles like correcting injustices and speaking out against violence. But let's also keep it a buck and recognize that there are people who treat their democratic beliefs and their cultural knowledge as a form of social capital, their ticket to an elite in-group that donates to the proper causes and uses the right words and judges those who don't. A social club where you've never had to sacrifice your moral high ground for a paycheck because you never really needed that paycheck to begin with. When these people mock and belittle Trump supporters, you sometimes can't help but hear the classist subtext. The way that they put on a southern accent when they mock the other side's lack of education, their stupidity, their religion. The message being, don't worry, I belong to your in-group. I'm one of the enlightened few, not one of the foolish masses. This comment from one of my subscribers that I mentioned earlier expressed it well when they continued by saying, quote, "Both poor whites and minorities don't believe the government can or will protect their interests. And they're not crazy to think that way. Yes, conservatives are wrong about a lot. But folks, you've got to understand that they are a product of their environment and social pressures, the same way that inner city youth are. That doesn't mean you have to marry one, but for fork's sake, quit demonizing them, and then maybe we'll have a chance of getting their votes back one day," close quote. That was a bit of a digression, but the point I want to make is about the danger of idealizing and pledging blind loyalty to institutions. Because herein lies the concern. You come to institutions like political parties and religions to help you decide or recognize what is right and wrong, and then those very same institutions become the reason that we exclude, that we judge, and in some cases even that we hurt and kill. This reality necessitates something deeper, a moral system, your own personal non-negotiables that you would follow, even if your institutions called upon you to defy them. More on that later. I left the United States in 2018, and since then, my friend group has consisted predominantly of other immigrants and expats. In groups like that, in order for the friend group to function, we do have to abandon some of our most rigid prejudices or political affiliations. Of course we do. Because we share dinner with our own nation's allies and enemies and everything in between, and sometimes we even get along better than we could with our blood families. What I'm describing is the idyllic best-case scenario of people abandoning or even just questioning the in-group, out-group models that they were probably raised with. If you let go of your your original party affiliation, your original religion, nation, university, favorite brands, gender and race, and football team, then you can begin to choose and rebuild your values based on what you like best, and thus you become the master of your own universe, the Übermensch or Überfrau. My husband and I are from different countries, and we spent our 20s living in a series of different nations, and as a result, we can, in theory, assemble our own home's Franken culture. A little Argentine when we cook meat, a little Colombian when we dance, a little Mexican when we romance each other, and then a little Irish Catholic when we decide that not every emotion needs to be outwardly expressed. In an article I wrote about this concept called All My False Gods, I wrote, quote, I select my beliefs from different dogmas as if I'm choosing my favorite fruits from various baskets of the
being
market,
American sounds so fucking boring. Everything is just like a nationality, it's not individual.
Nice. If it were really
and nations have just assumed everything.
Institutions that once provided the language structure is liberating and thrilling, sure, but it is also terrifying and exhausting. Institutions are comforting. If I decide that I want to follow my political party's approved list of beliefs, then before an issue even becomes part of the
talking to people from different countries that
room has already decided for
stereotype me as
about it, and they will report news and pay influencers to inform me accordingly. Cool. For me, that's one less thing to worry about. I've already been told what my opinions are. In the book Perfection by Vincenzo Latronico, which is about expats in Berlin, Latronico writes that the protagonists, quote, would have liked to have been in their 20s for the summer of '68 or when the wall fell. Previous generations had a much easier time working out who they were and what they stood for. The problems back then might have been more urgent, but they also had clearer solutions. Now, there were too many choices, with each one leading off on endless branches, preventing any real change, close quote. That's one aspect that makes it harder to build your own belief set with all of your favorite bits from different political affiliations, different cultures, different religions. It does imply more effort, more time, but to be honest, many humans are actually okay with effort if they feel that it's worth it. What worries me more is that if I am truly intellectually untethered, then I could get sucked up into any belief set that has the strongest gravitational pull. I've heard tell that those most susceptible to joining a cult are precisely those who think they are immune to cult indoctrination. I love the metaphor of choosing my favorite fruits from different baskets at the market, but not all fruits are equal, and you shouldn't treat them as such. We do still need some agreed upon truth, some semblance of objectivity. Otherwise, we'll treat the opinions in a peer-reviewed study from a team of PhDs with the same weight as the opinions in a YouTube video made by a conspiracy theorist who's on the sex offender registry. Even if you hate certain things about institutions and you vow to free yourself from them, it remains true that scientific advancement, records of knowledge, political change, group mobilization, and even things like modern healthcare, a lawful state without widespread anarchy, these things would not be possible without powerful, non-corrupt institutions. And it is a marvel, a testament to human intelligence and social organization that we have even been able to build such powerful institutions, even if they don't always get everything right. And especially when you're young, I think that it's important to be raised with moral framework. When Jordan Peterson was an unknown college professor, he wrote and presented lectures about how our political beliefs can blind us to the evil within ourselves and within our own group. He spoke about how Nietzsche predicted that political affiliations would replace religious affiliation, and that would lead to widespread conflict in the 20th century, a prediction that ultimately came true. Peterson appeared intellectually liberated and coherent. Fast forward a few decades later, and Peterson has identified the North American left as the problematic modern equivalent of the 20th century's most dangerous and violent ideologies. Then, when the January 6th attacks on the Capitol happened, Jordan Peterson struggled in interviews to understand and analyze the act of extremist violence because it hadn't come from the party that he had already identified as problematic. He could not believe that the political right, the party that had rallied around him and supported him when he was shunned and canceled, the party that seemed to have come to represent in his mind order and personal responsibility, could turn into the violent, murderous, irrational revolutionary crowd that attacked the US Capitol. Wouldn't an academic who wrote and studied for years the way that normal people can become radicalized through political ideology have been able to predict that? Could it be that his belief that he was immune to political radicalization exactly what made him susceptible to it? J.K. Rowling wrote one of the most popular book series of all time, with the main message being that everyone has both good and evil in them, and we have to choose to be good, to be loving, even when the crowd disagrees with us.
We've all got both light and dark inside us. What matters is the path we choose to act on. That's who we really are.
Later in her career, J.K. Rowling began to dedicate her public persona to speaking out against transgender people to a point of obsession. Transgender people are an extremely vulnerable minority population, and J.K. Rowling throwing the validity of their very existence into question whenever given the opportunity, even writing a book about a man who dresses up like a woman to kill women. It does real harm. As Natalie Wynn wrote, quote, trans people are a population of people. We are not an ideology that's up for debate, close quote. I can't help but wonder if, in her mind, J.K. Rowling sees herself as Harry when the Daily Prophet made public opinion turn on him, as if she were a misunderstood hero underneath it all, even in her moments of extreme hatefulness. Can't help but wonder if her belief in going against the grain and being a free thinker is exactly what blinds her to the immorality and even the cruelty of her own actions. Maybe she gets a buzz from disagreeing with other intellectuals, but sometimes your critics are right. And just because you're going against the grain doesn't mean that your actions are morally sound. Whether you do everything you can to go with the majority or everything you can to go against the majority, you are still allowing majority opinion to completely dictate your belief set. And in that sense, you are not free. That's one more point that I want to make, which is a common fallacy that I see among those who claim to be free thinkers on the internet, including some of the men in this interview. There is a lot of criticism of universities as biased institutions that limit free speech and attempt to turn people liberal. This criticism especially comes from the disgraced academic crowd. The Jordan Petersons and the Brett Weinsteins, also Candace Owens has been a huge critic of American universities. But one major fallacy that I see in this line of thought is that the internet, and especially social media, is often treated like the superior alternative. The intellectual actual playground where you can explore different viewpoints without being brainwashed. And maybe there was a time when the internet was more of a neutral ground, but let's admit that in 2025, social media platforms have become their own majorly powerful institutions with an agenda. On Elon Musk's Twitter, if a user finds themselves curious about talking points on the right, maybe because they're interested in lower taxes or in smaller government, or maybe just because everyone around them is conservative, then their algorithm will almost immediately start to show them barefaced, white supremacist, homophobic, sexist propaganda. Just a few years ago, these were considered fringe belief sets, and now they saturate social media. And the effect is that even if people don't agree with these talking points, seeing them so often can normalize them and push the Overton window further toward extremes. And if you aren't anchored in some form of belief set or even some institutions, if you are entirely untethered, then you can easily get pulled down the social media political rabbit hole. We are especially susceptible to this when we're young.
It was definitely legit on Path of Exile. I totally believe that. But he was just a CEO of a company while playing 18 hours a day. I believe that.
Any philosophical approach
Elon
to
Musk.
a member of society and an intellectually honest thinker? Can we think without cognitive dissonance? I won't speak for others, but is enlightenment possible, or is it just a delusion? I won't speak for others, but speaking for myself, I have found that I do need almost a list of beliefs and values that are not necessarily aligned with any singular institution, but they should carry the same weight within my person as if they were sourced from a widely recognized and respected institution. I'll call those your core belief set, and they usually take time to develop. When I was in my teens and 20s, it was sometimes
you
frightening to
can't
me how
click
quickly
F?
my opinions could change, how light and fluid they were, and I sometimes stubbornly held on to certain institutional belief sets to give myself some solid footing, but with time and with experience comes more certainty, and after a little while you can look back retroactively at your behaviors and realize, here's a common thread, okay, I guess that's what I believe. And you can come back to those beliefs in moments of crisis. This is the belief set that you call back on when you are deciding if you agree with a certain institution, if you agree with the actions of the masses, or if you want to be an outlier. The idea is that if pacifism is part of your core belief set, then even if you live in the town where they have the lottery, you would refuse to throw a stone, or maybe publicly advocate against the lottery by sharing social media links to anti-lottery political organizations and anti-lottery infographics. So to bring it back to dating and love and marriage, I don't think that your partner has to align with your in-group. To answer the question that I felt was neglected in this article, I don't think that you have to date within your same political affiliation, nor do you have to date within your same race, religion, nationality, etc. But I do think that you and your partner should align on that core set of beliefs, those beliefs that go deeper than what your institutions and in-groups have told you is important. On the poll that I shared on my profile about if you would date someone who disagrees with you politically, the top comment was, quote, "There's political differences and there's value differences. I support public transportation and I think light rail is great. I would date someone who thinks that increasing bus lines is a better strategy than increasing rail lines. I would not date someone who thinks that climate change is not real or important. I think increasing access to healthcare is important. I think increasing medical school and residency spots
Jesus
provider availability. I would
Christ.
date someone who thinks that increasing the number of PAs is a better way to increase affordable primary care.
That's one of the stupidest comments I've ever heard. I mean, I agree with the sentiment, but that is one of the most... That has to be one of the most retarded comments. Yeah, I disagree if we should, you know, build a monorail or a bus line. I'm sorry, that is not a disagreement. A substantial disagreement. Oh my word. If you call that a disagreement, just like point to right door. Point to right door. It could be somebody that believes in car culture. It could be some car culture cunt. Oh, this is disgusting. It's Olga. I have to dash now. Perspicacious. It's not a substantial disagreement in any sort of manner whatsoever. It would have to be somebody that was into car culture and advocated for building more motorways and bigger and inducing demand. Smiley face. It'd have to be that. That'd be an actual substantive disagreement. I don't think people can handle disagreements because they never have to actually interact with people that they disagree with. Unfortunately. Brilliant. Oh! Yeah, fuck it. I just need the mute. Alright, time for the incidents now. Let's see him around. It's super ogre. This is the most ogre game I've ever seen in my life. I need to kill it with the nades. Oh my god!
I would not date someone who thinks poor people should die of preventable illness. I'm happy to date someone who has different political beliefs than I do, but I don't want to date someone with values that conflict with mine, close quote. This is something that I've dwelled on a lot in the context of my relationship. As I said, my husband and I have the same politics, but we are from different countries. So especially when we first started dating, there were a lot of opinions or ideas that each of us sort of took as a given that were not a given at all to the other person in the relationship. And we had to reconstruct our ideas about expectations and gender norms and family dynamics essentially from zero. And in the midst of these conversations that questioned everything, I remember I started to feel sort of shaken up, and I asked my husband, how do we have any beliefs? Like, if all of them are questionable, is anything true? And my husband was probably 25 at the time, so I'm impressed with the maturity of his response. But he said that you do need to have core beliefs, those beliefs that you don't question anymore. And in the context of our relationship, that core belief that you should never question is that I love you, and that I'm not going to stop loving you. Dr. Orna Gralnick from the show Couples Therapy once said in an interview that she used to think that the greatest predictor of success in a marriage was an alignment, like an inherent similarity. But now she believes that the greatest predictor of success in a marriage isn't how similar two people are, but rather how able they are to love despite their differences. Someone messaged me anonymously to share her experience being married to someone who disagrees with her politically, and she said, quote, I wanted to share privately that I never thought I would date outside of my political beliefs, but my husband of 4 years and I do disagree on things. Notably, our moral and ethical values match completely, but sometimes opinions on policy, role of government, regulations, etc. do differ. I really appreciate it, actually, as he challenges my opinions rather than being an echo chamber and helps me not demonize people who think differently, close quote. I'm connecting to you as a random person on the internet speaking to probably a stranger to say that what you see on the internet is not an accurate reflection of how different people feel about politics or feel about anything in the world. What you see on the internet is designed to be entertainment, to keep your attention, first and foremost, even if you watch in anger. Now, I am not telling you to marry someone whose politics you are repulsed by. It would be hypocritical of me to give that advice. But I wanted to zoom out in this video because I feel like every time I go on social media, there is somebody trying to convince me to hate someone because they disagree with me, because they are a man, because they're a woman, because they're from somewhere different from me, or because they are a flawed human being. I have had in-person contact with people from all walks of life. I've had the opportunity to know and come to love a diverse collection of people with different thoughts and opinions and quirks and nuances, some of which drive my stubborn self crazy with rage, and it has been one of the greatest gifts I've been afforded in this lifetime. Based on what I see in real life, real stories of people showing up for each other and taking care of each other and seeing past differences, I do not believe that the divided and angry portrayal of human interaction that we see on the internet is accurate. So if you read this article and it made you angry, or if this video is making you angry, or if some other brain rot pissed you off today, just know that one of the most powerful acts of resistance against a social media addicted reality is to not let that anger and hate infect you, and choose instead to be grateful and joyful for your life. I refuse to detest strangers because in my mind they embody some stereotype. I refuse to become hardened and hateful. I refuse to harbor anger toward myself and others. I love mankind. I remain optimistic. As Martin Luther King Jr. said in a big mural in my hometown, quote, I have decided to stick to love. Hate is too great a burden to bear, close quote. I am almost certain that there will be people in the comments keen on letting me know that my opinions are overly optimistic and foolish, and I invite you to leave those comments and get it off your chest. I am actually on my belated honeymoon, so I will not be reading the comments much anyway. Saluda.
What a knife. Tier 1 gangsters adapt to the situation. We knife. I wonder where the term BL1 gangster came from. Just a bunch of gamers calling themselves gangsters for playing a video game. Times 2. I'm surprised that wasn't a sound council.
vital, as no other organization will sanction fights for trans people.
Well, see, in my case, I can't get a sanctioned fight. And so, yeah, I just end up doing the unsanctioned fights just because there's a lot less paperwork and everything. There's a lot less, like, official hard rules. Like, I was supposed to have a pro fight, like, 3 years ago, and it ended up not happening at the last second just because the commission said that I had to fight topless, which I was like, I'm not going to do that.
While the idea of underground fight clubs conjures up images of people fisting each other to death in a green-filtered basement, everyone I spoke to for this video had the same conclusion. Street Beefs feels like a community.
You really notice there's not as many beef fights as there used to be. Mostly people go in there to compete or use it as a platform to promote themselves because they welcome everyone. You know, and there's still beef fights, and the main thing is the brotherhood, it's about community, and it's actually about positivity. So in a lot of ways, it is, you know, pretty progressive for fight work.
Ninja Ron may have felt differently, but when I went to ask him, I couldn't find him anywhere. Really, the only bad thing I heard about Street Beefs through all of this was from Megadeth's post-fight medical attention, which somehow did more damage to him than the entire fight.
But they taped up the cut at the end of the night, and this is one of the negatives, is they put the tape kind of on my bottom eyelid, so as my friend is driving me home and I blink, the tape cuts my eyeball. I don't notice how bad it is. I think maybe I just got some dirt in my eye or something from fighting on the ground. And then the whole night, I don't even feel the cut on my eye or the cut on my cheek because the eye hurts so bad. So then I actually drove myself to the emergency room that morning and got it looked at, and sure enough, they said I had a corneal abrasion. I think they said it almost looked like a paper cut on my eyeball. Maybe the ringside physicians could have been a little better.
What started off in Scarface's backyard as a place for gangsters to settle disputes has now gone global and given people of every stripe a chance to compete. And while the original message of guns down, gloves up in the era of wind, sea and death sentence seems about as archaic a concept as paying for pornography, I hope Satan's back passage remains open to everyone for a long time to come.
What a bitch!
Welcome back to the Blown Apart Shopping Network. Napoleon, it's so great to have you back at BSN. I hear you have something super special for us tonight. Want to tell our viewers about it?
I just know that if you're like me, you've always wanted to own a mutilated piece of another human being, a real conversation starter, a piece you can use to impress your friends, or use as a part of a blood rite to summon the great old one from its eternal slumber. Well, now you can, as the BSN offers you this once-in-a-lifetime deal. For only $7,000, you too can own the mutilated remnants of a human ear. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Now you too could own this formerly attached ear. Preserved for eternity like a pharaoh's organ sealed inside a canopic jar. Act now and I'll even throw in this formerly attached penis. Don't ask any questions.
It's 2023, and somewhere in the forlorn hellscape that is Northern England, a man using the assumed name of Lee is attempting to bring his own underground fight club to life. Lee has been hooked on watching unsanctioned fight clubs on YouTube since the initial COVID lockdowns of 2020, and now, 3 years later, has taken it upon himself to start his own.
I just remember just flicking through YouTube in lockdown, and I come across this, and I was like, what the fuck is this? I was just watching it for about 7 hours straight, just fight after fight after fight. Just everything, all the hooligans there with the masks and everything. It's just, yeah, crazy, man.
But while organisations like Backstreet Beefs have rules, referees, and at least made an attempt to build something that resembles an octagon, even if half of it is fucking plywood, Lee is arranging a no-rules street fight to be held on whatever patch of God's cursed soil there is in this wasteland of Stockton-on-Tees. Eventually, a location is chosen. The fight is set to take place under a bridge, as if its competitors were common rock trolls. You'll notice I said fight, singular, and not fights, plural. And that's because Lee is not organising a fight club, in so much as he is arranging a fight, singular. As you might expect for a no-rules underground fight arranged by a man in a tracksuit, weight classes are an afterthought, and there's a size difference that would make Kelvin Gastelum hit the Ozempic. As far as each fighter's level of experience goes, the tale of the tape is, Christ only knows. The fight itself is nasty, brutish, and short. After the initial windmilling phase, the fight goes to the ground, or more accurately, to the foot-deep pool of runoff rainwater the men are brawling in. The larger competitor lands several full-force blows to the back of the head. A rule violation that would bring a regular fight to a shuddering halt, but not this affront to athletic commissions everywhere. After what is half rear-naked choke, half attempted drowning, his opponent taps out. And that's it. The handful of people in attendance go their separate ways, and the makeshift arena is now just a shabby, rain-sodden underpass once more. What inspires random guys to attempt to stage a kumite in a car park? Well, the answer to that is pretty straightforward. It's King of the Streets.
Welcome to hell, motherfucker!
King of the Streets is a no-rules, anything-goes underground fight club that originated in Sweden. And that's kind of all we know about it, so yeah, I mean, I guess that's it for this video. Okay, so there's probably a little more to this story that we should discuss. King of the Streets was founded in Sweden, and it is true that outside of its inner circle, not much is known about its hierarchy or operations. You won't find any Scarface-esque characters hogging the limelight here. In fact, most people involved with KOTS go out of their way to hide their identity, to the point that every fight is filled with more balaclavas than the 1996 IRA fall catalogue. There are several reasons why you might not want to be associated publicly with running a fight club like King of the Streets, and we'll get to those soon, but for now, let's just get into what exactly King of the Streets is all about. King of the Streets, or COTS for short, is a no-rules fight club that makes street beefs look like a rambunctious episode of the Teletubbies. Biting, eye-gouging, low blows, soccer kicks with shoes on, and fights take place on concrete.
There's no rules, no rules. Headbutt, eye-gouge, food, everything, whatever you want, allowed. Okay, don't, we keep you in the drum, don't expect...
I know they're hardcore in Sweden.
Grab the fence, you can grab the fence. Okay, any questions? Motherfucking go! Yes!
At every turn, COTS seems to be going out of its way to be edgier than Shadow the Hedgehog at the Grand Canyon, but with over 1.5 million subscribers and even their own pay-per-views, it's a shtick that's absolutely working. From the outset, I have to give credit where it's due to COTS editors and videographers, because it's immediately apparent that this does not look or sound like any other fight club, aside from, well, Fight Club. The Street Beef's early fights were filmed on phones and uploaded straight to YouTube, with only the bare minimum of editing taking place. Things have improved in recent years with better cameras and editing, but it's still a very basic look and feel. COTS, on the other hand, are out here using 4K cameras, drone cameras, film quality color grading and photography. Also, you can see eye gouges and dick punching in 4K HDR. Everything in COTS, from its music choices to its camera work to its glitched out editing style, seems to have been chosen specifically to cause the maximum amount of anxiety and discomfort in the viewer. If you look at how the average UFC fight is filmed, the cameras are outside of the octagon looking down at the fighters and use a relatively wide field of view so that you can see the fighters and their positions relevant to the octagon at all times. COTS fights are filmed as close to the fighters as possible, with cameras positioned so that they are often looking up at the fighters, giving the fights a far more up-close, claustrophobic and POV vibe. The locations that these fights take place in are also chosen pretty specifically to up the intimidation factor.
You're a fucking
buildings, warehouses, car parks, rooftops, an empty hockey rink. Abandoned, forgotten, or derelict spaces. The kind of places in which a body could lie undiscovered for months.
How are you alive?
Would you risk putting your life for $500,000? Yes, let's do it. Okay, good luck.
Oh my god.
In their own words, COTS describe themselves as no decisions, no rules, no rounds. The most notorious fight club, the one and only place for the unwanted ones, delivering the most stressed out and fucked up environment you can find. If Street Beefs is a light-hearted community of oddballs who enjoy fighting, COTS is a nihilistic, misanthropic celebration of violence for the sake of violence. COTS was founded in Gothenburg, Sweden, around 2013, primarily as a fight club for hooligans. And now I realize that according to my demographics, over 50% of my audience is American, and you guys probably think a hooligan is a character in a Charles Dickens novel that is now a Broadway musical. But hooligans are a bit more serious than that. Hooligan as a term dates back to the 1800s, but this isn't that deep a history lesson, so let's skip ahead to the 1980s. In the 80s, the term hooligan applied exclusively to groups of hardcore soccer fans. Groups of hooligans, known as firms, would travel to soccer matches with the express intent of starting fights with rival firms, police, or just causing mayhem in general. This became a huge problem.
Thank you for calling them firms. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hooligans were blamed for causing the deaths of 39 fans in the Heysel Stadium disaster of 1985. I'm even old enough to remember that when Ireland played England in 1996, only 26 minutes into the match, a group of English hooligans began throwing anything from bottles to sharpened coins to seats they had torn out of the ground at Irish and non-violent English supporters alike. This was the Lansdowne Road riot of 1996. Out of 4,000 English fans, this entire riot was instigated by a group of only 30 hooligans. So while maybe not on the level of the Crips and the Bloods, hooligans are not to be taken lightly. One of COTS' most popular uploads is a fight between two opposing hooligans, Simon the Savage and Ronan 030. According to COTS, both men were what is known as top boys, meaning high-ranking or even leading members of their chosen firm. As the fighters are introduced, Simon pounds the cold concrete of the makeshift arena, screaming and pounding his chest like the war drum of some forgotten chieftain, before annihilating the clearly overmatched Ronan 030 with a blitz of punches to the ecstatic howls of a blood-drunk crowd. The duality of man is ever surprising, as the same man who annihilated a fellow hooligan in a no-rules underground fight club can nowadays be found modelling the latest Tom Clancy novel and offering PT lessons on Insta. But even among some hooligans,
Oh my
Kotz is
God!
viewed as being a bit much. Journalist Karen Zidane spoke to an author named Robert Klaus, an expert on German hooliganism, who wrote a book called Hooligans, A World Between Football, Violence and Politics. Klaus said, some German hooligans who are active in semi-professional combat sports said that they would never fight there because they believe it's dangerous to fight on concrete. They think it might ruin your body and your career if you get knocked out and hit the floor with your head. Then, it's all over. This really is no exaggeration. And let me just be 100% clear on this for anyone who is wondering what my stance is, but fighting on concrete surfaces is the playground of the maniac. You only have to Google the words one punch attack or coward's punch to see a litany of stories where someone was assaulted with a single punch and then collapsed and struck their head on concrete. The result in many of these attacks is death due to brain bleed, or at best, serious life-altering injuries.
You get a takedown on concrete floor, back of your head, fucking game over.
Yeah.
You just kill some dude accidentally. His family's gonna get involved, obviously.
definitely.
You're gonna be picked up. You know, whether you consent or not, you're still fucked. You willing to kill someone and go to jail over this? Are you willing to die over this?
Given the severity of some of the knockouts I've seen in King of the Streets, how no one has died due to this is beyond me. Combat sports are dangerous enough even in sanctioned events. In 2021, a fighter named Justin Thornton suffered paralysis and later died after being knocked out during a bare-knuckle event for BKFC. Just this year, 2 Japanese boxers fighting on the same card died due to trauma sustained in their fights. If Kotz continues the way it has, sooner or later they'll add a name to that list. But I get the feeling that even if someone did die, Kotz would just stuff the body in a wheelie bin and delete the footage. That wasn't a joke. Like most endeavours, Kotz did not emerge fully formed. It took some time for them to evolve into the slickly produced and edited package that it is nowadays. Much like Street Beef's early offerings, Kotz's initial uploads were hastily arranged brawls that looked like they were filmed on a wet dish rag. These early fights were from a series called Tunnel Fights, which unfortunately isn't a bunch of dwarves bare-knuckle brawling in the mines of Moria, but is in fact the far more depressing reality of 2 men brawling in a urine-soaked underpass. In these formative years, Kotz even did beef fights a la Street Beefs. I've no idea what this particular beef match was about. Maybe they both turned up wearing the same outfit and one of them refused to go home and change. All of these early fights were done without any kind of refereeing or medical staff, and as such, they are all considered too violent for YouTube, as every one of them is age-restricted and demonetized. But despite these early videos being age-gated and shadow-banned, Kotz, like many other channels, would see a surge of popularity during lockdown. I guess all that isolation really had a lot of us longing for the touch of another human being, even if the other human was attempting to curb-stomp you. But since lockdown, there's no denying the view counts on Kotz videos jumped exponentially. 1 million views here, 2 million there, 3 million here. And most of these viral hits were thanks to the whirlwind of screaming brutality that is Simon the Savage. Simon is 5-0 in King of the Streets, an impressive record for any promotion, but in a promotion as brutal as Kotz, this is like being 5-0 at Russian roulette. A win record like this in Kotz essentially makes you the Michael Jordan of booting people in the face. Simon's first viral hit was this Muay Thai versus Taekwondo fight, in which we discovered that Taekwondo should probably have a restraining order placed on it that keeps it 500 feet from no rules fighting at all times for its own safety. This video did 1.1 million views, despite being age-restricted by YouTube. For Simon's next fight, Kotz had upgraded to a makeshift octagon made of crowd control barriers, and lit the arena with the oppressive glare of floodlights. The intro to this fight is approximately 1 minute and 8 seconds long. That's over twice the length of the actual fight, which is even more impressive when you consider that Simon finishes his opponent twice. After a knockdown that should have in all likelihood ended this fight, his opponent is stood back up, only to endure a second finishing sequence that is honestly pretty difficult to watch.
What? Come on now.
Simon's popularity peaked with his fight with Ronin 030, which has at time of writing almost 4 million views. Simon is currently living and training in Phuket, Thailand. In early 2025, he started a GoFundMe to raise money for a training camp, with his end goal being a contract with One Championship or Bare Knuckle FC. The fundraiser is still open, but after 7 months has only raised about €3,000. His recent Insta posts made it seem like he was just living his best life out in Thailand. Each photo is almost sickeningly laced with positivity. It's wall-to-wall ice baths, CrossFit, healthy living and hard work. But as I was writing this video, a clip began circulating of a man with a Danish accent and bearing a striking similarity to Simon in the midst of what appears to be a psychotic break. It's still unconfirmed if this is actually Simon, but the clip was filmed in Phuket where Simon lives, and the man is wearing a Fairtex shirt, Fairtex being a famous Muay Thai training gear brand. I reached out to people involved with Kotz to ask if anyone knew if this really was him, and everyone I spoke to said it was. I also found this upload of the clip from the Phuket Times, which describes the man in question as a Danish boxer, all but confirming that the man in the clip is Simon. In 2021, COTS well and truly cemented their ability to go viral with the fight between Insanus and Shooter, which I guarantee is the best fight video you will ever see, where one man is wearing jeans for the entire fight. Taking place on the filthy hardwood floor of an abandoned attic, two guys who don't look old enough to be watching the video that they're starring in brawl non-stop for close to 8 minutes. And while it may not be the most technical fight you'll ever see, it is one of the grittiest, bloodiest, and realest.
I see some battle wounds and some bruises. That's great.
Post-fight, both men are battered and streaked with the grime and dust of countless years, their faces a mask of blood. As they embrace each other in a show of mutual respect, the crowd erupts into an oceanic roar. The fight is summed up best by one comment, which says, "This is fighting for the sake of fighting. No fancy belts, no stupid titles, just blood and glory." Given the fleeting nature of most fighters' tenure in COTS, it's rare that we get to know any of them on a deeper level than, oh, this guy's a Muay Thai guy, or this guy's definitely killed a non-zero number of prostitutes. But with most fighters' careers lasting only 1 or 2 fights, it's not really an organization that lends itself to developing fighters' personalities. Even with 7 million views to their names, neither Insanus or Shooter ever had another fight as far as I can see. That's why it's hard to find any shinigamis or death sentences among COTS' roster. The fighting itself is just too brutal to make it a sustainable career path or an organization in which to build your own brand. But despite this, some fighters do manage to rise above being just another brain waiting for a concussion, such as this fighter named Cocaine Charlie. Only one of Charlie's 3 fights has been uploaded to YouTube, and it only lasts about a minute, but I think about this man a lot, due to the fact that he is the only person I have ever seen win a fight via flying headbutt walk-off KO. Another man to make a name for himself in COTS is Alex Etherington. It's genuinely surprising to see MMA mentioned in mainstream news media in the UK or Ireland. The sports coverage you get over here tends to devote itself to soccer, rugby, or Gaelic football, with MMA being a bigger afterthought than Eric Trump, unless McGregor had to expose his anus to a bus full of nuns or something similarly newsworthy. So it was genuinely surprising to come across an article about King of the Streets on the website for one of the biggest tabloid newspapers in the UK. I know, The Sun is to newspapers what Seagal is to martial arts, but still, it's pretty surprising. My ear was bitten off in brutal underground UK fight clubs, where anything goes. I keep it proudly in a pickle jar. As headlines go, it's no Gordon Ramsay's dwarf porn double found dead in a badger den in Wales, or find the bastard who shot down my chimney, but it is a decent effort. In 2023, COTS expanded from mainland Europe and staged their first ever event in the UK, and the most notorious fight that emerged from their sojourn to these islands was Alex versus Bash. The fight so brutal it made headlines. Bash had previously gained notoriety for knocking out his opponent during a pre-fight stare-down. The fact that this fight was filmed in grainy black and white and looks like it took place in Leatherface's rec room just adds to the snuff film vibe that COTS had been perfecting over the last 6 years. Seconds into the fight, Bash goes immediately for eye gouges, but not content with that, he proceeds to bite down on Alex's ear, shredding a large chunk clean off.
Oh my God. This is gonna do anything. Who needs their ears?
At this point, I think most people would have said, this shit isn't worth the free t-shirt, and tapped out. But Alex is, well, he's kinda special. Securing a takedown, Alex does some eye gouging of his own, which he uses to take mount. He then uses mount position for even better ocular penetration. And as Bash screams in agony, the fight is waved off. The whole thing only lasts about a minute and a half, yet sees 2 men almost blinded, and one leave with less body parts than he arrived with.
It's a real...
I know combat sports aren't safe, but compared to this, they're like a fucking tea party. They are. Anything could go wrong, anything. You need to go in there thinking, right, I could die here, so I'm either going to get ready to die or ready to kill someone.
Surprisingly, given that it was a fight comprised entirely of fouls, both men hug it out, and even pose for some of the most gruesome post-fight pictures imaginable. Alex has now fought twice for COTS, with his most recent fight being in their most extravagant pay-per-view yet, King of the Streets Matador.
This is sick, what the fuck?
About his career in bare knuckle and no rules fighting. I say attempted, because despite numerous tries, we never actually made it work.
Oh, you useless honestly, we've had weeks and weeks and weeks to do this, and you just haven't been able to fucking sort it out. This is on you.
Just to clear up any confusion, it was always his fault. We did, however, chat fairly frequently via DM.
Wanker.
And Alex is not the kind of person you might expect after watching his fights. Despite taking part in a fight that looks like a street fight broke out in the Blair Witch basement, Alex is as hilarious as he is handsome. I mean, Jesus, look at this dude. This guy might be one of the funniest people I've ever talked to, and despite the model good looks and fighting abilities, Alex is more down to earth than a 737 MAX built by IKEA. We chatted so much shit to each other that it got to a point where I was randomly sending him Shadow the Hedgehog gifs, and when I asked him if he minded if I called him New Metal Jon Snow for this video, he replied, Timu Aquaman. And just a brief sidebar here, the following clip is a video Alex sent to a woman on a dating app when she asked could she hear his accent, and this might be the best 27 seconds of cinema I've seen all year.
Hello there. This is my voice that I know you love to hear. And this is my accent, and it's scum. Absolutely scum. And I know that you can't wait to hear it in person.
It's honestly difficult to reconcile the fact that the same man who once DM'd me this
I wake in the morning and I look outside and I take a deep breath and I get real high and I scream at top of my lungs.
is the same guy who won the single most brutal fight I've ever seen. But if you had preconceived notions of what kind of person takes part in hardcore, no-rules street fighting, I guarantee Alex is not what you'd imagined. While we never had our interview, I did ask Alex to record his thoughts on what bare-knuckle and no-rules fighting really means to him.
Yeah, mate, so what you're going to have to do is remind me tomorrow to do this video. And I mean remind me, give me a message around 9 o'clock and then that'll fucking do it because I've just finished now and I need to fucking go, right? Okay, nice man.
Yeah. I probably should have expected that. In his own words, Alex only got into COTS out of a sense of boredom, after feeling like neither MMA or boxing was exciting him anymore. It was a weird bucket list kind of thing, he said. I needed something else in my life, not just the monotony of clocking in and out of work. And that is a sentiment that tracks. As for the people I interviewed for this video, boredom was one of the biggest drivers for competing in unsanctioned fighting. Shinigami and Megadeth fought to stave off the boredom of COVID lockdowns, and Alex fought in COTS as a way to escape the monotony of the daily grind. It's impossible to escape the influence of 1999's Fight Club when talking about these organizations, but it really does seem that whether by imitation or influence, the boredom and apathy that spurred Ed Norton's character to create that film's titular Fight Club is the same that's felt by many who enter the world of underground fighting for real. But not everyone gets into no-rules fighting out of sheer boredom. There are exceptions to this rule.
But yeah, I did it because it was fun, and I wanted the t-shirt.
Infamous for both his fighting style and outspoken personality, Eric Olson, aka Bloodaxe, is possibly the biggest name in King of the Streets. In making this video, I reached out to several COTS fighters to see if they'd be open to being interviewed, and Bloodaxe was one of the only people to actually take me up on the offer.
My name's Eric Olson. I'm from Long Island, New York. I'm from America. I'm America, and fuck Donald Trump. I hate Trump. I want to make that very clear because people seem to confuse that. I have no respect
more
for the
progressive than the
Republican
UFC?
Party, especially the conspiracy theorists.
More progressive than the UFC? He's more progressive than the UFC? What the fuck? Based. Fuck Donald Trump. What is it? What? It's not inherent for a fighter to be right-wing. Apparently, the most brutal fight. That's crazy. Let's go.
I hate Trump. I want to make that very clear.
Same.
People seem to confuse that.
Same.
I have no respect for the Republican
Same. I hate him
Party,
too.
especially the conspiracy theorists. Trump is a degenerate of epic proportions. He's a rapist. I don't like him, and I don't like America. I don't support America, and I don't represent America when I fight. I represent myself.
Yes.
I was legitimately nervous going.
Yes. Yes.
Video, I reached out to several COTS fighters to see if they'd be open to being interviewed, and Bloodaxe was one of the only people to actually take me up on the offer. In making this video, I reached out to several COTS fighters to see if they'd be open to being interviewed, and Bloodaxe was one of the only people to actually take me up on the offer.
My name's Eric Olson. I'm from Long Island, New York. I'm from America. I'm America, and fuck Donald Trump. I hate Trump. I want to make that very clear because people seem to confuse that. I have no respect for the Republican Conservative Party, especially the conspiracy theorists. Trump is a degenerate of epic proportions. He's a rapist. I don't like him, and I don't like America. I don't support America, and I don't represent America when I fight. I represent myself.
I'm not gonna lie, I was legitimately nervous going into this interview, and it only got worse when I had to try and talk Eric through downloading Zoom on his phone, an ordeal that made me think he might actually find a way to soccer kick me through the screen. If you're wondering why I was nervous, this is a man with a collection of human teeth. I was not trying to piss this man off. So what was it that brought you to King of the Streets initially?
It's no other way to put it. There's no deep meaning. I saw King of the Streets on YouTube back in 2021. I contacted them while I was living in the UK. This was during COVID, so flights weren't as straightforward and easy.
What?
Basically, I just saw it and I was like, this looks fun. I mean, I've been in fights all over the street here in New York, in America, and then fights in, when I was younger and I was incarcerated. I didn't do it for the money because they don't pay as much as, like, the bare knuckle company I fight for. It's not about money. It was just basically about fun. Like, I wanted the t-shirt.
Do you ever worry about the physical consequences of fighting in such a hardcore form of competition?
Like, when people say hardcore, that to me isn't, it's hardcore to every, yes, but it's still regulated compared to the situations I've been in Nassau County and Suffolk and downstate and Fishkill correctional facilities 20 years ago when I was younger. But those situations were a lot more serious with consequences, both physically and legally. So King of the Streets is like, you don't have to worry about getting shot or stabbed, and you don't have to worry about prison in America, which is the worst thing in the world with the way it's run.
Eric holds the record for the most amount of fights in COTS, with 7, and is infamous on the scene for not only being the only American in COTS, he also pioneered the eye gouging technique.
Whether people like it or not, I'm the one who innovated brutality. Without me, people weren't gouging eyes, and now the people who still gouge eyes, they don't know how to do it, which is why their fights suck and they can't finish them.
He even gave me an almost 15-minute-long instructional on correct eye gouging techniques.
I slide this up here, I'm already hitting the eyeball. You can grab the bone. Once you grab the bone in here or down, they're done. You can push, and you'll hit the back of that bone. And if I go straight down with my thumb, all my full body weight is coming into my thumb, and I'm hitting the back of their eye sockets.
And after that, all I have to say is, John Jones, I'm coming for that title. Gouging eyes is a choice that has led many to call him a dirty fighter, but in the world of no rules fighting, I feel like hating on someone for eye gouging is a bit like hating on someone for spawn camping in a Battlefield game. Yeah, it's not a tactic the game is designed around, but it's also not illegal, so you can't really be mad when someone uses it. Bloodaxe is also one of the few fighters who has had beef fights, and his most famous beef fights are with a man named Tomas, and this leads us to the thrashing blue whale in the room.
Yeah, I think I read that your beef with him was basically his neo-Nazi beliefs, was that right?
Yeah.
Tomas is an out and proud neo-Nazi, and many who fight in COTS belong to neo-Nazi or other extremist groups. And okay, it's around about now I can hear certain people Tokyo drifting their way to the comment section to tell me that people on the left call everyone a Nazi just because they disagree with them. And yes, people on the left do have a habit of calling anyone they disagree with a Nazi, which does have the knock-on effect of diminishing it as a label if you apply it to everyone even vaguely right of center. But when someone has tattoos of SS lightning bolts, several swastikas, the words white power, a portrait of Rudolf fucking Hess, and also runs one of the largest online stores for Nazi-inspired clothing, I'm pretty sure I'm looking at a bona fide Nazi, and all the gaslighting in the world isn't going to convince me that those swastika tattoos are actually window tattoos that he's getting done on an installment plan. There are other fighters with links to extremism who have appeared in COTS.
Blown is really funny.
He's described in this article as being part of an increasingly professionalized, internationally well-connected neo-Nazi and hooligan network. And this is the ugly truth behind COTS ties to hooliganism. Because remember that 1996 riot I mentioned earlier, and how it was caused by only 30 hooligans? Well, those 30 hooligans were members of an infamous neo-Nazi group, later designated as a terrorist organization called Combat 18. The links between hooligans, neo-Nazis and extremism is a long-standing one, and in some cases, not even an attempt was made to hide those links, such as the hooligan firm named Hunara, which was shorthand for hooligans, Nazis and racists, a name that leaves very little room for doubt as to what these guys' worldview was. It should be noted that not every hooligan firm is extremist in their beliefs, but extremists absolutely view hooligan firms as fertile soil for recruitment. A 2019 RAND Center of Excellence paper on the subject stated that extremists use the stadium, ultra groups and hooligan groups as spaces for recruitment. The paper also noted that this can be a generational issue, stating that it should be taken into account that hooligans are not always recruited, but may have been raised in an environment conducive to extremist beliefs and attitudes. The end result of recruiting your stable of fighters from hooligan firms is that whether you intend to or not, a not insignificant percentage of your roster is going to be made up of people who harbor some pretty extreme and hateful views. As for King of the Streets, the organization itself maintains that they are staunchly apolitical. When one fan questioned why COTS would allow an anti-fascist fighter to compete, they replied, "Everyone is welcome to Fight Club. We don't give a fuck. ISIS is welcome, terrorists welcome, Nazi welcome, anti-fascists welcome. We don't care."
Yeah, like
Base.
a political organization, and they're not neo-Nazis, they're not anything, they're not involved in that.
In an interview with Karim Zidane, Jonathan Lehman, a researcher
Let
with
anyone fight.
Racist magazine Expo, said, "My perspective is that it's neither fascist nor anti-fascist. It's more about the fighting."
Base.
COTS is infamous for its impressive implementation of foul-based fighting, but eye gouges, headbutts, dick twists, and a panic-inducing feeling that we are a rapidly devolving species isn't all this organization has to offer. What helps COTS stand out from similar unsanctioned organizations is that by comparison, it has a much higher caliber of fighter. Street Beef's competitors are all amateur fighters, in some cases sub-amateur. Once a fighter turns pro, the doors of Street Beefs are closed to them, but there are no restrictions on a fighter's level of experience in COTS. Hence, this is one of the few underground fight clubs you can find that actually has professional level fighters. Bloodaxe has fought for Bellator, and other fighters such as Abner Skullman Yoveris have fought in the UFC. Skullman was even part of the McGregor vs. Faber season of The Ultimate Fighter and made it to the quarterfinals, winning 2 out of 3 fights. Other notable COTS alumni are Brian Hoy, aka Hoy Boy, who has a pro record of 19-12-0 and has fought in Bellator and KSW. I bring up Hoy and Skullman not only because they're some of the more experienced and talented fighters COTS has on its roster, but because these two men were involved in a fight that is worthy of anyone's time, even those who might be turned off by the no-rules nature of COTS. Every organization has legendary fights. Pride had Sakuraba versus Gracie, the UFC has Griffin versus Bonner, Power Slap had Dana versus his wife, COTS has Homeboy versus Skullman. This fight is an absolute feat of human endurance. For contrast, the current largest bare-knuckle league, BKFC, has 2-minute rounds, so that even in a 5-round fight, the absolute longest you're going to go is 10 minutes. Skullman and Hoy fight non-stop for 20 straight minutes. By the end of this fight, each man's hand wraps are so blood-soaked, you can almost hear a sickening squelching sound as each shot lands. Once upon a time, I said, a soldier will fight long and hard for a bit of coloured ribbon, and for little more than their own bit of coloured ribbon, whether that's in the form of pride, a purse, or simply a feeling of truly being alive in a world that seems intent to numb us into an apathetic existence. Brian Hoy and Abner Yoveris put on one of the most impressive feats of endurance you'll see in combat sports. In Brian's own words, this is the most raw form of fighting. We compete in these events to satisfy an inner feeling, an urge for blood like in the gladiator
Oh my
times.
god!
Even in the bleakness of
I'm getting
Kiev
too carried
streets,
away.
there is
I'm too
artistry
tired.
to be
I need to stop playing.